Okay, everyone, one more concern I have about cost over revenue. And the example I like to use to illustrate this before we dive into the data is talking to a young child about waiting for the next Christmas. So when our son was really young, like Max was 2, the day after Christmas, he said, "Dad, Christmas is so far away now." And to him, to his perception, that makes sense because being 2, the next year is 50% of the life he already has had. 2 years, 1 year is half of that life. And then that next Christmas comes and he's 3, and it still feels like Christmas is far away, but not quite as far. Because when you're 3, 1 year is only worth 33% of your life. And then when he's 4, 1 year is only worth 25% of your life. So when you're very close to 0 years of age, Christmas feels very far away because that 1 extra year is a large chunk of the life you've already had. And as you get further from 0, those percentages get lower. Compare that with an old fart like me. I'm going to be 50 soon. And if I'm 50, 1 year when compared to 50 is only 2%. And the older you get, the less that 1 extra marginal year is worth compared to the life you currently have. Well, as it turns out, there's a beautiful connection of that mathematics to the concern I have about cost over revenue and the relative size of the revenues of departments. Let's take a look. Okay, so what I have here, I pulled 6 sets of courses from CTE. I'm only going to focus on CTE here because the same exact argument is going to hold for transfer too. I pulled Wildland Fire, Fish and Wildlife, and APR. The reason I picked those 3, that's like max in the Christmas analogy. They have the smallest revenues of the entire CTE set of 29 sets of courses. And then the other 3, CISB, A, and Aviation, they're like me in the Christmas analogy. They have the largest revenues in the 29 sets of courses for CTE. So columns A through D, you've already seen before. That's the current cost over revenue metric based on the most recent data we've got. Now, what I've done is I've created a marginal cost over revenue, and marginal meaning that we're going to change it by ostensibly 1 student taking 1 class. Now, I made an assumption that a class is 4 credits. So what would happen if we put 1 more student taking 4 credits into each of these sets of courses? That's what column F is going to show us. It's going to show us that marginal change. Let's do it. Let's put 1 student into each of those sets of courses. So you can see what just happened. All of the measures changed because the denominator just got bigger. Okay, so the costs still stay the same cost. I mean, you're not going to have to add a faculty member because you're adding 1 student in 1 class. So the costs stay the same. The revenues just went up by, what is that going to be, $436 because we just took a 4-credit class at $109 a credit. In column G, I'm looking at the percent difference, which means I'm taking the marginal cost over revenue, subtracting the cost over revenue, and then dividing it by the original cost over revenue to show you percentage-wise how much different the new measure is from the original measure. And you could see that Wildland Fire, Fish and Wildlife, and Apprenticeship all dropped percentages, and the other 3 didn't change hardly at all. They did change a little bit, but hardly at all. And the reason is quite simple. For those 3 courses, Wildland Fire, Fish and Wildlife, and Apprenticeship, the $109 times 4 means a lot more to their revenue because it's a larger chunk, just like that 1 year meant more to Max than it did to me. If we add another student, it continues. And what's interesting about this is if you get to 4 students, if you take a look at Fish and Wildlife, not only is there a 12% difference between the marginal cost revenue and the original cost revenue, but a difference of only 4 students taking 1 class each over the course of a year removes them from the threshold flag, because now 2.01 drops below 2.04, which again is also a comment we have on the thresholds. We'll get to that in a second too. So And you may have noticed that there's still seemingly no change to CISBA and aviation. Now, that's not entirely true. They are changing. They're just not changing very rapidly. You'd have to increase the number of students in there quite a bit, especially with aviation, to actually see the percent difference. So I've added now 9 students taking one class each into these sets of courses. And look at the drops for the smaller programs, right? 27% difference between the marginal cost revenue and the actual cost revenue. But yet the big 3 down at the bottom are hardly changing at all. And again, back to the Christmas analogy, it's because that $436 means a lot more to a small program's revenue than to a large program's revenue. And I guess that's my third concern with cost over revenue, is that the measure itself unfairly targets smaller departments because a dollar is worth more to them than it is to a larger department. Okay, we'll wrap up in the next video.